This is Population Health Weekly. We bring the science to your street. One small habit, one clear choice. Right where real lives meet. Every voice, every choice, every truth that we share.
As life expectancy has increased over decades, so has heart disease. And for decades, heart disease has remained the top killer of people over 65. After 65, your risk of heart attack or stroke doubles every 10 years. Over 400 million older adults live with some form of heart disease. The aging heart causes strong ripples inside the body and outside too. You can see those rings spreading outwards, first through families, then through communities, finally through politics and economies. Each ring is wider than the last, and each one carries a heavier public health cost. So here's the question that connects biology to society. When grandma lives to 95, who really carries the weight? Families, governments, or strangers? The question is equally relevant to the grandpa.
Every voice, every choice, every truth that we share. Public health is everywhere.
Welcome to Population Health Weekly with me, Shahnur Azhar, and my co-host, Erin Rodgers. Hello, Erin.
Hello, Shanor, and hello to all of our listeners.
Every Friday, we bring you a key aspect of our monthly theme. Last Friday, on June 5th, we started The Rise and Rise of the Elderly by answering the question that why we seem to be paying the price of long-term care despite miraculous biomedical advances. Today, we discuss how that price or the burden is shared, from households to the United Nations.
In the second half of the show, we turn the spotlight on the segment about an issue we feel should require more attention. But first, let's get back to answer today's question. When grandma lives to 95, who really carries the weight? Families, governments, or strangers?
But before we get to answer that, let's look at what grandma actually goes through. From rich countries to poor, families are struggling. So, who pays for their pills? In settings with lower social protection, either grandma or her families pay out of pocket. And skipping doses is also a possibility. With cost sharing, the load lightens. But either way, someone younger pays. And beyond money, there's a quieter struggle when mobility fades, eyesight blurs, and hands lose dexterity. Social circles are starting to shrink. Grandma wasn't ready. Few of us are. She adapts, sometimes gracefully, sometimes shooting a frustrated glance at her grandchildren. But she manages with quiet courage, often alone. The real question, will we meet her halfway? Let's examine the three rings of the ripple, starting with the closest one, the household. For many families, an elderly parent's dependence comes as a surprise. In some households, multi generational living works smoothly. Grandchildren refill medications on time, help with paperwork or documentation, and run errands without being asked. The elderly feel supported, not abandoned. Friends and neighbors also step in, even a stranger who offers a bottle of water on a sweltering afternoon. These acts of informal care fill gaps that formal systems leave open. But this type of support cannot be guaranteed. It varies by culture, income, geography, and sheer luck. It's riskier to rely on it as a primary solution for an aging population. We cannot simply leave it to hope that someone will be there to meet grandma halfway. We need systems that do not depend on goodwill alone. The second ring around the ripple caused by the aging heart is made up of caregivers comprising professionals of younger age groups, paid nurses, home health aides, nursing home staff. These are strangers by contract, not by blood, yet they carry a heavy share of the weight. Globally, these workers cluster in cities where private agencies and hospitals operate. Rural elderly are left with far fewer options, sometimes none at all. In Europe, the shortage is acute. The European Federation of Nurses estimates a deficit of over 1 million caregivers by 2030. And like informal caregivers we discussed in episode 1, nearly 90% of formal caregivers worldwide are also women, often underpaid, overworked, and their own families may be neglected. This second ring, then, is stretched thin, a system that helps, but imperfectly. The third ring or circle is the widest. It has three main parts: international promises, national politics, and market forces. None of them work well together, though. International promises of long term care are evident in United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 3 for good health and SDG 10 to reduce inequalities. So far, the progress has been uneven because countries have very different priorities. Germany, for example, spends over 11% of GDP on pensions and healthcare, with regular infrastructure modifications like barrier free public transport. In contrast, Rwanda, a low income country with no tradition of social protection, has trained over 45,000 community health workers to deliver basic geriatric care in villages, a noteworthy effort born of necessity. National politics also continue to grapple with cost of living and shifting elderly needs, more chronic disease, longer dependency. Market forces push for privatization and automation. Private nursing homes, AI driven triage, robotic assistive devices. These promise efficiency but risk excluding those who cannot pay or adapt. Meanwhile, citizen groups that effectively advocate for dignified and accessible long term care are fewer. The result? Tangible solutions, blending public funding, community networks, and ethical technology, remain unsettled. The widest third ring is not a single answer. It's an ongoing negotiation between what governments owe, what markets sell, and what families desperately need. So here's the answer: families carry the heaviest weight. Governments and paid carers, they help, but they don't carry their weight. And that leaves grandma or grandpa and all of us carrying additional burden by a long shot. But this answer is incomplete without imagining growing older with no family at all. For those, the first ring, the household is empty, no grandchildren to refill pills, no neighbor to knock. The second ring, paid carers, may be too expensive or simply unavailable in rural areas. And that third ring, governments and markets, they rarely notice you exist. For those aging alone, every ring around their aging hearts is broken. They carry the heaviest weight of all, without anyone even noticing the ripple effect. The socio-economic outlook is not encouraging either. Global poverty rates among elderly is 14%, projected to reach 20% by 2050. If you are younger and listening, this is not someone else's problem. It will be your life in 20 years. Because grandma's quiet courage deserves more than our hopes, it deserves our action. Stay tuned for the next week when I tell a love story that resolved a global health crisis. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And now it's time for Spotlight, our fortnightly segment that brings to our listeners a relatively underreported global health issue that we feel calls for more attention. Erin Rodgers presents it.
Thank you, Shanor. Let's put the spotlight this week on PFAS, or per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, that are also called forever chemicals. A study estimated that this group of 4,700 chemicals are extremely resistant to degradation and breakdown. Over decades, their properties have been exploited in items of daily use such as kitchenware, textiles, food packaging, cleaning products, paints, and sealants. Forever chemicals represent serious global health risks because they seem to be everywhere in our environment. Associations between exposure to specific PFA substances and a variety of health effects have been reported, including altered immune and thyroid function, liver disease, lipid and insulin dysregulation, kidney disease, adverse reproductive and developmental outcomes, as well as cancer. The European Environmental Bureau, or EEB, recently reported that the scale of PFA substance poisoning in European waters and fish has been widely underestimated. Another study reported by the New York University in 2025 revealed that forever chemicals were not only more abundant than previously thought, but also largely consist of pharmaceuticals that have received little scientific or regulatory attention. According to the study's lead author, this is just the tip of the iceberg. A very recent book titled Beyond Plastics has also presented a detailed analysis of this issue. The magnitude of contamination by forever chemicals and what it means for our oceans and land warrants every country to take action. But preoccupation with health challenges already at hand seems to be keeping this elephant in the room from receiving a proportionate collective response. I'm Erin Rodgers. Back to you, Shanor.
That's it for this week, listeners. Technical support for this show is provided by Wahab Shahid. Podcast logo, theme music, creative and production advice is given by Imran Babar. Erin Rodgers is our editorial associate. Population Health Weekly is led by its listeners, and they are invited to participate in any competent way they can. If interested, email us at info@ideas.org.s, info@ideas.org.es.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Population Health Weekly, where you can also post your thoughts, comments, and imaginations. You can also subscribe to our monthly newsletter on our website, ideas.org.es. It's free. You can also donate to us through ideas.org.es and the hosting platform rss.com. All contributions will be dedicated to improving the quality of this show. The transcript of the show will be available as soon as it's posted via rss.com. If Population Health Weekly sounded interesting to you, then spread the word.
Special thanks to Junta de Andalucía and Gobierno de España for their support to autónomos that made this production possible.
Tune in next week when we answer, Big Pharma gave us longer lives. Now can it afford to keep us healthy without breaking the bank?
Empowering you to stay healthy.